Hey guys, what's up? Lightboltjoe here. Today we're going to discuss the 1985 cult classic horror film, Return of the Living Dead. This film is a quick hour and a half long. It has been a cult classic for many, many years, well over a decade, because of how memorable this film is. This film is labeled a comedy horror film, even though it's supposed to be a dramatic horror film. And it's a comedy because a lot of the acting is kind of really bad, but the zombies are hysterical in this film. So we have a new virus, basically, which stems from this U.S. government kind of experiment, and these canisters of human remains kind of went missing, basically. And they have been in this medical supply center for quite some time. Quite some time. They've been missing for like 30 years, something like that. The government has always been looking for it, but they never actually could ever find them. So then one of the main characters, Freddy, he starts working at this medical supply center, and he's getting the runs. You know, this is where skeletons are, this is what the cadaver is, this is where half dogs are, butterflies, etc. And then the old guy who's training him tells him about this, legend that the the Army, left these bodies here, with this chemical in it. And then Freddy's like, oh, are these things safe? Are they going to leak? And he's like, are you kidding? This is made by the government. It's the finest craftsmanship. Smacks it. Gas leaks out everywhere. And then the sound, the score of the film, which is this classic 80s rock kind of score, just comes into effect. It animates all of the cadavers, all of the dogs, all the butterflies, within the vicinity. The two characters inhale the smoke, the gas. They themselves are starting to feel queasy and sick, so they call their boss. They try to chop up the cadaver and bring him, who's alive and screaming, and bring him to the morgue, which is next door. So there's a morgue right next to a cemetery, right next to a medical supply center. It's all on this one property. So that's kind of where the story takes place. So they bring this cut up pieces to this guy, Bert, at the morgue, who's a wackadoo himself. Convince him to let them burn the parts, but then when they burn the parts, the smoke, the ash, goes into the atmosphere, creates this acid rain. The acid rain, therefore, then trickles down on the cemetery, creating the rise of the living dead, the return of the living dead. You see how that comes into effect? So what's funny is that Freddy's got a group of friends who are waiting for him in the cemetery till he gets out of work at 10. So they're partying, This one girl, Trash, she just takes all her clothes off, and she's just doing a whole striptease on a gravestone, and it's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Just the teenage angst of 1985, and Scuzz is another character, and he's got this awesome lip ring to a piercing combo with a chain, and he's like, nobody understands me. Do you think this is an effing costume? It's a way of life. Now you could tell I've seen this movie a lot. I'm obsessed with this movie. This is a great film. Like, I know how they talk. I know the lines. Like, it's just wonderful. I'm obsessed with the soundtrack. I have the soundtrack on CD from when I was a wee lad. It's just such a great rock opera with zombies in it. The zombies can talk. They say brains, and then they explain. This one that they capture explains why she wants brains, because it helps with the pain of being dead, because she can feel herself rot. And then you have this one zombie dressed up as a police officer to get more cops to come, and then they all attack them, and eventually the town is then, nuclear bombed, and then more acid rain happens, and then a repeat of the exact footage we saw happens again. But one of the most iconic moments of this particular film that's referenced in any horror history montage, a skeleton is rising up, and the puppetry is amazing. The animatronics is quite fantastic for an 80s film, because it's practical. There's no special effects. It's all practical art. So the skeleton rises up from the grave, and he's got eyeballs, mind you, and he drops his jaw, and as soon as he goes, "Bah," right? Then you hear a rock song blasting, "Do you wanna party? It's party time." And then you have all these other zombies coming up from the grave and crawling and attacking skulls and attacking trash and attacking all these other teens, and it's just great. And then the theme song basically of this entire film is "Do you wanna party? It's party time." And I can never not see a skeleton with his jaw open, like a surprised face, screaming, "Do you wanna party?" It's just great. It's just such a classic kick-ass film from the 80s. My favorite effect, aside from that particular moment, and aside from the characters then turning into zombies, is when Tina gets to the basement of the medical lab center and she sees the goo zombie, and he's just so adorable, and he's all wonky, and he's like, brains, and it's great. But when she first sees him, the camera does that pan out, pan in thing, so it zooms out, but it pulls back, so it creates that effect. I love that effect, man. I love that effect. I know we talked about that when we reviewed Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I love that effect. It's such an awesome effect. I'm a sucker for good for good cinematography. I'm a sucker for good camera work. I always reference Fast and Furious 7 when Hobbs and Shaw are fighting each other in the CIA office, and like Hobbs picks up Shaw and he flips him over a table, but the camera flips with you, and you're like, where did this come from? Like, it's just so cool when camera work unexpectedly takes you to somewhere. We just talked about Stranger Things Season 3, where a character kicked a table, and when he kicked it, the camera tilted, and it stayed tilted, and it was so creepy, and I'm a sucker for that. I love that kind of craftsmanship when it comes to film. So, well done everyone. Kudos to the good actors, kudos to the bad acting, kudos to the props, the costumes, the entire cinematography, the lighting, the sounds, the soundtrack. The simplicity of this film is what makes it amazing, and that's why it has transcended over, 30 decades? 34 years? Yeah, 34 years. Amazing. Have you guys seen Return of the Living Dead, classic 1985? Cult horror classic film. What do you think? Let's discuss it. Mucho mahalo, guys.